Welcome back to Alter Life. I'm Dr. Ben, and today we're talking about the PsyOp of modern medicine and how medicine is programmed, or I should say, the medical industrial complex, if you will, is programmed to keep you sick, to doubt your body. Maybe you've already known this, but maybe you don't know what to do about it, how to break free from this. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing how modern medicine shapes your beliefs, the business of keeping you sick. How did this all start? The feedback loop of fear, how it self-perpetuates. And finally, we're going to get into some action steps, most importantly, to break free from this feedback loop of fear and the medical industrial complex, if you will, controlling you, and how to take control of your health, and mainly not through just lifestyle. That's kind of common sense at this point, right? But how to take control of your health through your thinking. So I have to set the stage for this conversation. I feel like it might get a little bit ranty. I might get a little riled up. So I'm intending to keep myself, calm, cool, collect, and stay to the points and the facts, and just work our way through this really important information. It's important to understand and see the truth in order to break free from it. And of course, I think a lot of this stuff is oftentimes viewed through this conspiratorial lens, like, oh, I don't know, like if there are in fact nefarious influencers who are really intending to keep you sick. I don't really care what the facts are. I do believe that facts are facts, and that maybe we don't know for sure what is the case or who is quote unquote in control. But needless to say, it doesn't really matter for the point of this conversation. It matters that, like, what the objective facts is that there is this economic model that is designed to make money off of sick people. So acknowledging that fact, what can we do about that? How can we break free and have sovereignty over our health? And again, the biggest point of leverage is how we're thinking, how we're relating, and specifically reshaping, rewiring the belief system. Because, as we'll get into, you've been programmed to doubt your body. Maybe you are regaining control and confidence in your self-healing capacity, but there are extreme forces at play that are designed to keep you doubting of your body and keep you reliant upon outside influences, outsourcing your health and fear-based medicine. So I also want to point out right off the bat that, of course, there are great, well-meaning, amazing, brilliant, smart, kind-hearted doctors working in a corrupt system. And I'm not just blanket statement labeling all doctors as corrupt or bad, but we need to acknowledge straight off the bat that the system in which they are indoctrinated, dare I say, is corrupt. And we'll talk about what that means, how that happens, etc. As we get into the episode, I'm going to start with our quote of the day, and this one's really good. I was introduced to Sir William Osler when I was in Canada. He is a Canadian doctor. I'm not introduced to him physically. He died in 1919. He was around 1849 to 1919, and he's got some brilliant quotes around health and healing and medicine. He is known as the quote unquote godfather of modern medicine. But ironically, a lot of his viewpoints and statements were very contradictory to the current philosophy and paradigm of conventional modern medicine, which is indicative of this quote that I'm about to read. One of the first duties of the physician is to educate the masses not to take medicine. Wow, just kind of like digest that. This is the so-called father of modern medicine telling the masses not to take medicine. So what happened to this philosophy, this ideology? What happened to Sir William Osler, a great Canadian doctor? Well, Osler was around before the Flexner Report, which really took the medical industry and completely reprogrammed it, reestablished, reworked specifically the educational system. And I want to talk about that in just a bit. But first, I want to introduce this first chapter of how modern medicine is shaping your beliefs. The power of medical programming, the medical industrial complex, if you're not aware, and back to the earlier statement about the Flexner report, which is kind of how the medical industrial complex came to exist, it is the most powerful influence in the world. I think some people think like, oh, the oil industry or this industry or that industry, but really, in terms of power and dollars and just sheer force in our world, the world at large, not just our, American culture, the medical industrial complex has a tight grip on society. They are, of course, in control of media and politics through lobbying, through advertising. They're really pulling the strings of all the narratives. If we're not aware already, this is true. Again, not a conspiracy, just fact that media or that the pharmaceutical industry, and specifically the pharmaceutical industry, of course, is one and the same with the medical industry. They are paying for what's coming through the news, and also what is coming through mainly every media outlet. And again, like I said, this isn't due to the fact that all these doctors are in on it and they're like being bribed and paid to like lie to you or to, maintain this corrupt system, but they have been indoctrinated through a corrupt system. Back to the Flexner report. So I talked about Sir William Osler. He was, a brilliant physician who was around until 1919. And in 1910, that's when the Carnegie Foundation, which is, multi-billion-dollar family, right? The Carnegie Foundation contracted a guy named Abraham Flexner to essentially get rid of all influence from natural medicine, natural health promotion standards and systems, whether it be chiropractic, naturopathic medicine, herbs, homeopathy, all these sorts of, gentle healing supportive modalities. These were replaced like on a dime through the Flexner report. And specifically, the Flexner report was able to kind of wipe away all of these natural healing traditions, natural healing science, and replace it with pharmaceutical-based education in the medical schools. So all of the medical schools, essentially in one swoop, were completely systematized to treat a mechanistic model of healing, which we've talked about in prior episodes, the reductionistic mechanistic model of kind of your body's like a car, and we can just treat things and fix things like a car. And we do that through pharmaceutical based modalities. So this Flexner report, which was again funded by the Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefellers, which were big oil families. A lot of these especially the first pharmaceuticals, were oil-derived products. They controlled the medical education system, and then, of course, they sold the treatments that they indoctrinated the students, the new doctors, to prescribe. And this was, again, in 1910, so 115 years ago. And it's crazy to think like nothing has changed. Of course, science has continued to evolve and people study things, and doctors, are free thinking people, but they're still in the same system that was established in 1910. And despite the advancements that were perceived to take place over the last 100 plus years, really it's coming through the same model, the same influences, the same industry, and the same entangled, corrupt nature between pharma and medicine. So as I already said, as is completely, clear as day, there is no profit in health. Medicine is a for-profit industry, and healing is not a profitable business. So in other words, disease management is the name of the game. It's not about how to resolve symptoms and for good, it's about how we can manage symptoms. So, tons of research dollars, tons of science is done not on the reversal of disease, but on the drugs that are designed to keep diseases and manage diseases. So, this leads us into this business of keeping you sick. Why health isn't the goal, but disease management is. Health isn't the goal, like I already said, because health is not profitable. There's tons of profit in managing disease, and dare I even say, promoting disease. This is where, of course, the pharmaceutical industrial complex and the medical industrial complex is very much intertwined with, for example, big food. All of the, American Diabetes Association recommendations for nutritional considerations to manage diabetes, they're influenced by each other. So there's no like diet that's promoting the reversal of diabetes, even though that's very well established that reversal of diabetes is completely possible through nutrition and lifestyle, as well as so many other conditions. I'm just using diabetes as an example. But the fact is that these influences are cross-contaminating each other and influencing each other. And again, without any intention for true reversal of conditions, of symptoms, of diagnoses. And I also mentioned how the scientific research model is completely corrupt. If you didn't already know, the vast majority of research studies that are done are funded by big pharma. They are done on drugs and potential new drugs to, again, this whole idea of like, oh, we're developing new things. We're having all these incredible advancements in research and technology around the treatment of disease. But it is, again, just the management of disease. And the interesting thing about these pharmaceutical funded studies is that generally, at least my latest understanding, is that less than 50% of these studies that are done are actually published. And that's because they only publish the data that supports the claims that they're trying to make. And there's plenty of examples of this, and pharmaceutical companies have been caught manipulating data to try to prove narratives in order to corroborate the development of drugs. One of the biggest, latest examples of this is the treatment of quote unquote mental health disorders through this model of just chemical imbalances in the brain. Of course, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, are one of the hugest drug classes in the world. And that whole drug class, and as well as the SNRIs and many others, were completely created on fraudulent science. So there are maybe there are chemical imbalances in the brain, but what is chemical balance? This is, of course, a whole other topic for another day. But the fact of the matter is that mental health is not a factor of just balancing chemicals in the brain through pharmaceuticals. And of course, we also know that when we take these pharmaceutical medications, this leads us into the next point I want to make, which is about the cascade effect. When we take pharmaceutical medications, then there are cascades of side effects that are common. And then, of course, those side effects can be treated with more medicine. So not only is disease management super profitable, but the whole side effect industry is also super profitable because, hey, we can, quote unquote, treat this disease while we recreate this other imbalance, then we can treat that other imbalance and create another imbalance. And oh my gosh, we're just raking it in. And of course, well-intentioned doctors are following the protocols and the standards of care, but people are completely led astray. So I want to share some examples of this cascade effect if you're not already familiar with it. One great example is the treatment of pain with NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which are classically known to cause gastritis or acid reflux, which can then be treated with antacids, and people stay on antacids for years, and that creates all sorts of mineral imbalance in the bodies and osteoporosis. And then it goes on, right? And then people break their hips because of osteoporosis. And then, yeah, anyways. So that's one example of this cascade effect. I find this fascinating because a lot of people are stuck somewhere in this cascade effect of pharmaceutical care. And again, side note, I'm not suggesting that people just strip themselves from pharmaceutical drugs like without any consideration, but the goal should be to heal for real, which again is not a profitable industry. So another example of cascade effect is the treatment of high cholesterol with statins, and that leads to muscle pain, which leads to the treatment of that pain, maybe with NSAIDs, gastritis, the list goes on. Another good example is blood pressure medications treating high blood pressure. That leads to fatigue or low mood, which then is oftentimes treated with antidepressants, which have a whole host of other side effects. And maybe the biggest one, and that I don't have any personal experience with any of these, but one of the biggest things that I've heard people talk about more and more in more recent times is birth control, the use of hormonal birth control, hormonal contraception. And that one of the side effects of that is mood changes, which is just so natural. Like we shift with these fundamental molecules in the body, and yeah, we experience mood changes. And then people are pathologized for their mood changes and put on, again, antidepressants or bipolar medications or antipsychotics, oftentimes for life, or and then completely thrown off balance, and their whole worldview and their whole beliefs, and they think they're sick and they think there's something wrong with them, but they have just been imbalanced through the treatment of hormonal contraception. So this whole industry of the cascade effect is really fascinating to me. I want to press pause and go on to the lesson of the day. And this is very aligned with the nature of our conversation. And the lesson of the day is to see your symptoms not as problems, but your body's answer to the problem. And I should also say your body-mind answer to the problem, because we know that we're not just a body. We are a body-mind complex, a multidimensional organism. So the symptoms that we experience are just the natural response to life, to self-balancing process. So I think that this is really powerful and oftentimes very hard to apply, because when we are quote unquote sick, if we do experience symptoms, especially if those symptoms become more chronic, then we can get in a place of self-doubt and fear. And then, as we'll get into, oftentimes that fear is reprogrammed through the whole model of the medicalization and pathologization of everything. But there are so many examples of the physiologic responses being clear mechanisms by which our bodies seek balance. One such example is a fever. Most people know at this point that a fever is just your body's recalibration, and specifically, the boosting of your immunity to kind of detox, cleanse, self-regulate. Fatigue, oftentimes, especially like in acute instances, right? Fatigue is just like your body's message to take it easy, to rest, to lay down, to let more of your energy go into the regeneration, repair, and healing processes. So why does this matter? We're trained to look at our symptoms. I'm still on the lesson of the day here, by the way. We're trained to look at our symptoms as problems to fix. And again, the medical industrial complex loves problems because they've got so many treatments to manage those problems. But rather than seeing your symptoms as problems to fix or problems to manage or problems to treat, we can see them as expressions of the body in the self-balancing, self-healing, self-regenerating processes that are always taking place. Regardless of where we are and what we're doing, our body is healing to the best it can, given the environment and resources that it has at hand in the moment. So the mindset shift here associated with the lesson of the day is to, instead of like the fear-based thinking, how do I get rid of this? How do I overcome this symptom as quickly as possible, even though, of course, we do want to support our bodies in overcoming the symptom as quickly as possible. But it's not about how can I fix this? It's about how can I listen to my body? What is my body trying to tell me? So essentially, we're shifting from fear into trust. And just think about like what that does for our body at large. Not only does it loosen up our mental state, but it allows things to flow so much more fluidly. All right, let's talk about back to this feedback loop of fear, as I like to call it, that the medical industrial complex is associated with creating and keeping us in this feedback loop of fear. It's funny, I was going to call this section the idiocracy loop or something along those lines, but I'm trying to be less judgmental, even though, of course, I'm sure my judgment is showing, and that's okay. I am highly critical of the system, and again, I am always intending to separate people from system. People are wonderful. System sucks, and there's only one way to do about one thing that we can do about it, and that's to raise awareness so that we can support ourselves in opting out of that system while creating the new system that makes the old one obsolete. So yes, the system is based on this feedback loop of fear, self-perpetuating itself. We've got these white coats, right? Doctors oftentimes, I know some great people who wear white coats, so no ragging on the white coats per se, but they are designed to create this hierarchy. Like, oh, that white coat was earned. When I was in school, there was a white coat ceremony. That was kind of weird, and it's like, oh, now you got your white coat, and it's like, ooh. And it's just so weird. And so once that doctor is wearing that white coat, then everything seems more serious and factual, and the doctor knows everything. So when the doctor gives you the diagnosis or shows you your test results, then it's like, oh, he's wearing a white coat. He clearly knows more than me. And yeah, he of course does know more than you, but he doesn't know everything. And we're going to get into like the flawed nature of diagnoses and lab tests. But when you receive your diagnosis, this leads us into the whole phenomenon of the nocebo effect, which is profound and powerful. When you receive the diagnosis, if you're not informed and empowered, then that diagnosis oftentimes becomes your identity. And maybe it's happening on a completely subconscious level. Maybe you're trying to avoid that identification with the symptoms or the diagnosis, but oftentimes that happens. And there's tons of research to corroborate that when the doctor says something, then a patient is so much more likely to continue to manifest those symptoms, or those symptoms are more likely to be exacerbated. And I always think about a story of Dr. Susanna's that she's had in her, 10 plus years ago healing journey. She was experiencing tons of joint pain and stuff and chronic fatigue. And she went to a doctor who was, quote unquote, more holistic, more functional. And this doctor was like, oh, well, your joint pain, your fatigue is due to digestive issues. You've got this SIBO phenomenon or whatever the quote unquote diagnosis was. And then, the next day, Susanna started experiencing what came to be chronic digestive issues. Like the joint pain was still there, kind of started to fade away, but then she was manifesting like the digestive issues. They just kind of came out of nowhere through the diagnosis, which is kind of like this spell that doctors cast on people. Of course, it's not an intentional thing. They're not trying to keep you sick, but the nocebo effect is real. And anytime we receive a diagnosis, I like to visualize taking that diagnosis, that word, and putting it in the trash can, just letting it go, just shredding it, just moving on with your life. Because it's like, they're just sets of symptoms. A diagnosis is just a set of symptoms, and symptoms, again, are the messages from our body that are completely dynamic and in motion and self-resolving and self-healing. That's what our body's trying to do. But our mind can get in the way so profoundly, so often. So then there's the endless stream of tests and labs that reinforce this diagnosis, and the whole nature of medical testing is flawed as well. We think that we're like getting all this incredible enlightening information, and of course there's some great information that can be gleaned through tests, but we also have to remember that a test, literally, it like factually, objectively, it's just a snapshot of some microscopic phenomenon taking place in your body in one moment. Your body is more than numbers and tests, and again, those numbers are always fluctuating. So of course, like sometimes this is the industry knows this, and they try to like say, okay, if you're going to get your hormones tested, you want to do that first thing in the morning. But like first thing in the morning for me today was different than first thing in the morning yesterday and 2 days ago. Like it depends on your sleep, it depends on your thinking, it depends on your stress, it depends on what you ate the night before, it depends on what you didn't do. Everything everything influences each other, right? So we just need to step free from this identification with numbers, with diagnoses, with testing, with the system. That is, of course, if you are wanting to break free and experience more freedom from whatever symptoms or system you are, finding yourself stuck in. All right, let's shift gears and talk about finally what we can do about this. And I'm sorry for going on and on, laboring on the issue, because I do intend to stay solution focused in this podcast. It's all about taking control of our health, our life. So, how to reclaim your health sovereignty? Step one is to question everything. There are very few facts in this world. There are so many things that we don't know than that what we do know. And back to this white coat phenomenon, just because your doctor tells you something doesn't mean it's true. It means that's what he thinks is true, and and maybe it is what he was taught. Like I'm sure it's right in his worldview, but it doesn't mean that it's the fundamental universal truth. The truth is, if you're willing to embody this truth, the truth is that you are already perfect, whole, and complete. You are self-healing, regenerating, balancing. You are connected with the fundamental energies of life that maintain perfect order and harmony. And why not just step into that truth versus to outsource your truth to someone who told you something based on their worldview, which is, again, back to the Flexner report and the pharmaceutical, blah, blah, blah. It's fundamentally corrupted. Again, lab tests are just numbers. It's just a snapshot in time. It's not the absolute truth. Diagnoses are just labels of symptoms. It's not a life sentence. It's just because it often becomes a life sentence through the nocebo effect. You are more likely to continue manifesting those sets of symptoms. But it's so important to let the diagnosis go, to put it in the trash. That isn't to like shred your medical records, even though that's okay to do too, but it's to just mentally, psychologically let it go the best you can, whatever that looks like. Don't believe everything you're told through your doctor or through anyone for that matter, including yourself. Oftentimes you're telling yourself so many fear-based narratives. Don't believe everything that you're thinking. So that's step number one, is to question everything. Step number two is to shift from fear to trust. And maybe this is like a conceptual practice for you right now, but of course the intention is to feel into this, to feel trusting, to actually feel trusting, to really know and trust for certain. And maybe it starts with the conceptual and then you like embody that. But symptoms are messages of your body in the self-balancing, cleansing, detoxifying, regenerating processes that are always unfolding in your perfect structure, mind, and being. Your body isn't broken. That is the truth. Your body maybe you broke your arm, maybe you had a physical injury, maybe things are out of balance, but your body, when your body is quote unquote acutely broken, there are inherently the self-healing phenomenon that are taking place even when we're sleeping. We don't have to do anything about it. For example, you cut yourself and you put on a Band-Aid. The Band-Aid isn't healing you. Your body is healing itself, and the Band-Aid is just keeping the dirt and stuff out of your wound so that it heals more cleanly. And most importantly, I think that it's important to shift our self-talk, back to this fear-based narrative that we are programmed to be in. You're also probably likely in that fear-based thinking, even when you're at home by yourself. And that's because you've been conditioned and are living in this fear-based society, and it's not your fault and you're not the victim. But it's so important to gain awareness of the nature and content of the thinking that you are, believing, for lack of a better analogy, right? So don't believe everything you think. And the way I like to relate to it is treat yourself and talk to yourself and think to yourself as if you were taking care of your best friend, your child, your mother, and this has become easier for me, dare I say, since being a parent, because I'm so used to the positive self-talk with my daughter that I catch myself when I'm in the negative self-talk with myself, because there's such a discrepancy. So it's like, why can't I talk to myself internally like I'm talking with my daughter? So that's kind of the practice to gain awareness to that internal dialogue. Step number 3 is to take care of your physical environment. And I have already kind of spoken about this in previous episodes about your holistic diet, as I've called it. The media, the news, the Instagram accounts, the podcasts that you're consuming, and also the doctors that you are seeing. Whatever possible, try to find a practitioner that is helping you to be in this reprogrammed state and is not operating in the completely fear-based reductionistic model. This is probably very hard because the vast majority of people are still indoctrinated in this system. Side note, I forgot to mention, a lot of people think that back to the medical industrial complex self-perpetuating itself, a lot of people think, oh, well, my doctor, they've got like 20, 30 CMEs that they do every year. They're keeping up to speed with their medical education. What they learned in school, yeah, maybe it's no longer relevant, but they're continuing to educate themselves and looking at the research and blah, blah, blah. Continued medical education is 100% pharmaceutical propaganda. Like pharmaceutical companies pay for the continued medical education, especially in the conventional system. And I also should have talked about how in the alternative system, oftentimes like the same influences are the supplement industrial complex, which are a subsidiary oftentimes of the pharmaceutical industrial complex. Big pharma is buying, if you're not aware, all of the supplements. And that's not to say that there are that supplements are all bad because big pharma owns them, but we just have to take it all with a grain of salt and know that what is coming through education, both conventional and alternative, is tainted. So anyways, we're talking about shifting the environment and taking control of our health sovereignty. Choose your doctors wisely if you're able to. Choose those that are helping you to be in that empowered space and not suggesting that you maintain that diagnosis identity. Also, surround yourself with people who don't dwell in the issues, not gossiping, not complaining. Just be in empowered community connections, and most importantly, that self-talk with yourself. And I just need to reiterate that modern medicine, again, has its place in our world. My life has been saved by modern medicine. I'm so grateful that modern medicine exists, but it is not health promoting. We just need to acknowledge it for what it is. Life-saving, emergency. The emergency system is so important, but it's not healthcare. It is not healthcare. It's disease management and life-saving interventions. It's not healthcare. So we need to be in charge of our own healthcare. All right, let's get into the challenge of the week. Finally, the challenge of the week is simple, but it's powerful. And this is challenges specifically for people who have a diagnosis that they are working through healing. And the challenge is to drop the label. This is a powerful one. Again, it's simple, but it's difficult because we are so programmed to think, I have anxiety. I have this autoimmune condition. I have IBS. So whenever you catch yourself thinking that or saying that, or even I am anxious, I am inflamed, I have a stomach ache. Um, Rather than thinking that and saying that, you can reframe and rephrase that into I'm feeling anxious. Anxiety is real. The feeling of anxiety is here real. My argument, which I hope that you will open up to believing, is that anxiety is not a disorder. The feeling of anxiousness is real. It's not a disorder. It's not an identity. Also, whenever you can catch yourself thinking, I have this or I have that, maybe just shifting, I am healing from this or that. Maybe that's the first step towards health, is to really just start to loosen up on that label that you've been identified with. So this matters profoundly because every time you think that, every time you say that, you are creating that. You are creating your reality. And I know this might sound woo woo, but it's real. Okay. It's real. You are creating the framework and the setting to manifest more of the symptoms, the very symptoms that I'm guessing you want to free yourself from. So the first step of freeing yourself is to stop telling yourself that you're sick. And this is easier said than done, and leads me to just kind of a little plug for my current offerings at Alter Health. I'm stepping aligned into this sort of coaching around mindset and health. So if you feel like you're struggling, if you're feeling like you're wanting an empowered practitioner in your corner of health, that's my position and role. So if you want to learn more, you can shoot me an email, info@alter.health. We're in the process of kind of reworking some of the offerings at Alter Health, but I am here, and that's my calling, at least right now in this moment. Not only in this moment, but in this chapter of my life. So just in closing, remember that you are already healthy. You are already healing. You have control, and you just need to claim that and live with that understanding. And if this is resonating, if you feel like you have a friend, a family member, some loved one in your life that is kind of stuck in the system, feel free to share this episode with them. That would mean a lot. I'm trying to get this word and this empowering message in front of more people to shift the tides of consciousness in our collective. And also feel free to drop comments and feedback. Let me know how this lands. Let me know what you're taking away from this. And until next time, keep thriving.